So this is another clean conversation with Caitlin Walker and
Charles-Louis
Demar
in Belgium.
And we are going to talk about this. We come from a bit different backgrounds, but I think both of us are very interested in making the invisible visible. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get into this? How did the invisible become so interesting to you?
I think it's when I started working with groups in contexts I didn't know about, because I started working I have a background in computer science, so I started working with software systems and hardware systems and upgrading database and so on and so forth. But then at some point I realized that once you know how machines work together, it's easy, but like for human beings, it's a constant riddle. What's going to happen now? And then slowly I got into the whole work of facilitating and learning and so on. And then I discovered the world of clean by chance, and I thought hey, this is actually a great way to kind of understand better what the other person's saying without trying to paint it in our own colors. There's this Finnish, I think, professor who wrote something about funny laws on communication. And he said communication usually fails except by accident. And I find it really lovely and funny. But in a way, clean kind of prevents us from, not prevents, but helps us getting in a better accident. So in a better way of understanding each other.
One of my very first business projects was in IT and computing, and Chris Valley, the CEO who commissioned us, he said at the end of it, he said, Caitlin has helped me to realise that I have probably never understood anything and anyone ever in my life. I was like, yay!
Yeah.
So when particularly with computing, I think, because in computing businesses you often have such different internal processing. You've got the I don't tend to use labels about it. I tend to use groups of people who process in particular ways and like it in a particular way. But you can also think of it as a bit more ADHD-ish, a little bit more autistic, a little bit more... It's the very different ways of processing. And I found that it was like they were speaking different languages. Their internal hardware was so vastly different.
Yeah.
The codes weren't meeting.
Yeah, and also even beyond, a couple of years ago, I worked for a hospital in Switzerland, where the idea was, how does IT and business, but the medical part of the hospital work better together and can support each other. And they were also speaking totally different languages, although they were working for the same thing. And so it was also about hey, what do you need? What do you need? And then how can we kind of work better together on that side of things, and figure out a way where your communication systems work,
Yes, when they very first commissioned me, I was like, I don't think I work in business. What have you got? And Chris is like, we've got these programmers who hate marketers and marketers who hate programmers and engineers stuck in the middle. And it's like, yeah. That's the same as any of the classrooms that I've worked in. It's this lot makes sense to each other, and this lot makes sense to each other, and therefore it makes the ones that don't make sense to them. It's as long as you've got some people who make sense to you, you're like, it's them, it's just them. Yeah,
it's like we've got our community and we've got the others, but we have to make it work at some point.
Yeah.
So, and I know some people talk about breaking down silos. I'm not so much about breaking down silos, because sometimes it's important to have these communities, but what's important is to have some things that can go between, some osmosis and stuff like that. And I think in that way, having questions that can move away assumption, with clean and so on, helps really okay, and when it's that, it's what, and anything else. And so then you really get curious about what the others is saying. Of course, the intent needs to be there.
Yeah.
If you're there in order to scold or you're just doing bullshit or whatever, that's
No, the intent has to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you that it shouldn't always be like that. I did a lot of work in diversity and inclusion, and what we notice is if you've got enough commonality to create a sense of safety, belonging, and freedom, that's great. And if you're too stretched too much of the time as a group or as an individual, it means that you're not free to be at your best, to be creative, to be happy. And also, you don't want to be doing clean language in groups as a way of unpacking things for every interaction.
No.
That's exhausting.
Yeah.
So there's a sales team that I worked with in the finance sector, and they call it going sailing. So what they'd say is, okay, right now we're just doing our work, we're doing the work, and then we bump up. You do something or your team does something, and I'm like, nah. So we use drama, or we use Cartman's drama model as I'm not getting what I want, to go, it's an alert that says, hey, something's going on here, and if we're not careful, it'll go into contempt.
Yeah.
So I can just call you up and say, shall we? I'm in real drama with you, and you're like, woohoo!
Nice. Finally.
Yeah. And then what they call their metaphor for it is they say we'll go for a sail together. So me and you will go sailing on the lake of clean.
Yeah.
And we'll tack back and forth until we know where you are, we know where I am. We're like, oh, okay, now we know our route.
Yeah.
And then we stop sailing. So they're only clean when there's a drama alert.
Yeah. And I think to me also this is like for teams that do regular retrospectives, it can be also a way to kind of take that time to look at what's happening in a group. A couple of years ago, I was working with a team, and so I used to think that I needed to prepare the retrospective on a specific theme in advance. And then we had just had a review where we'd shown some of the work to our client, and it's been like, it was total drama. And then I think at the beginning of the retrospective, I didn't know clean back then. But I was like, hey, I prepared something on this topic, but I realized that something happened just before. Maybe we might need to, I haven't prepared anything about this, but like maybe we should tackle this. And so ultimately they chose to indeed tackle that thing. And yeah, so it's about making the time for it. And like, and indeed, I think it comes back to the intent, and like, if we're ready to at least do something about it or bringing it out, unpacking it, at least it will help. Coming back to the invisible visible, it will at least make it visible. Then we decide to do something with it or not. I mean, both can be fine as long as everyone agrees that nothing will be done with it, and then we live with the consequences.
Yeah. But at least you know.
Yeah.
At least we know it's there. Yeah. So in some way, so even before you knew clean, and it's obviously if anyone who knows my book knows it was important to me before, I was looking for something to help make the invisible visible so that we could update our systems. I was particularly interested in societal rules that came from a bygone era that were not relevant, that needed to be updated.
What?
Why my father-in-law doesn't understand why I don't want to be called Mrs.
Okay, yeah.
And he's like, but surely you should be proud to be married. I said, no, I'm proud to be married. I said, but when you were a child, what were you called? He said, Master Hotchkiss, and I was Miss Walker. I said, and then when you were 18, then what happened? He said, I've become Mr. I said, okay, what happened to me? So I'm still Miss.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm still Miss. And
until
I'm still
you get
Miss.
married.
Until I get married.
Yeah.
And it infantilizes women. It makes women, it separates us from a very early age. And he's like, well, that's never occurred to me. I said, well, because it doesn't.
Yeah, it never occurred, because once he was 18,
it doesn't impact you. It only impacts me. So I think that the whole, what was hard was to be able to have that conversation, not in that way I just had it with you, which was where I'm a bit sneery, but to help him, ask him the question structurally without bringing shame or argument or violence to the discussion, allowed him to see it in a way that if I bring all my feelings about the drama as well, he has to deal with my feelings and the subject. And I think that this work is really good for making the invisible visible without the drama.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Till next time.
Yep.